All right, we're going to have a chat. And Bill, you can talk about anything you want. There's no shortage of topics here. We have Austin's remarkable presentation on the good and the bad, more of the good than the bad in society. We had Garrett's discussion about education, which, as you know, is central to a lot of the problems that we face and a lot of the questions about our future. We had Ron's presentation about one of the intractable issues of our time, how we deal with manufacturing and the human component of manufacturing. And we had Christia's presentation, which is really one that people have on their minds these days. We have come to think, rightly or wrongly, in terms of almost in terms of class warfare, in terms of how we look at society, how we're, all of the topics actually speak a little bit to how we're losing this middle class, and then we're in the midst of an election. What's your take after hearing this? What's your take on the economy and where we are?
Well, first of all, I think you summed it up. I think all four speakers really did raise issues that we are grappling with, that are playing a big piece of this in this election, and in this kind of transformation we're going through with our society, both the economics of our society and culturally, and still trying to deal with a global world, even though we all, in a group like this, talk about living in a global world. Most people really do live in a very small world. I thought Christia's presentation, and I'm really interested in reading her book, and I know everybody kind of hair goes up on our backs about the thought of class warfare, and my God, this is, but it's based upon a reality, and we've got to accept that we've got a very different society today that's going on, and that's having impacts on us, so we've got to admit it and deal with it and talk about it, not run from it. I thought so all of this is playing out in an election that quite honestly gets dumb. Every 4 years we all say it can't get any dumber than this, and every 4 years it gets dumber than this, which is either commentary on the politicians or a commentary on us, and so we all blame the politicians. So I think it was a great, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing up here after these four people went through some really great ideas and thoughts about where we are. I do want to say on Austin's presentation, I really do believe, based upon I guess a basic optimism that I had, that I think we are in a much better shape than we can acknowledge. And at some point, the America that we all many of us grew up with, of really believing optimistically, has got to come back.
Interesting you say that, because as you know, there are lots of things that make up the economy, and if you took out the political ads, the attacks, and the media, and you just measured what people actually do, what they think, and how they behave, the American public's a little more optimistic than the rest of us are. Our sales show that, our consumer confidence shows that. But let me ask you this: you do know a thing or two about campaigns. I've heard you're a Democrat. But take yourself out of that for a second.
Some people may not agree with you.
Take yourself out of the politics for a second, and let me just put a thesis to you, because we're in an ideas place, so I want to put that forward. I have been saying it, possibly just to be provocative and get good responses from my very smart guests, but I have been saying that ultimately there are a lot of promises coming from two presidential candidates about what they can or cannot do. And I think that they're more limited. I will exaggerate to make the point, but they're a bit like the water utility. You can have two people offering to run your water utility. They are both going to give you the same water at the same pressure. They may change the price at which you get it or provide certain incentives, but ultimately the administration of the United States, the President's office, the stuff that's happening in the economy is bigger than the presidency. What do you think of that?
I don't necessarily agree with you. I think the president has the ability to impact, or the Congress and the president together, presidential leadership. What has happened over the last 30 years is that Congress has taken an enormous amount of the power of the presidency away domestically. That's why they all run and go to war and do foreign policy, because they can do something there. And actually doing something domestically is much harder, because both Democrats and Republicans, this comment got me in trouble last year, but it's true, have basically taken away a lot of the president's power. But if he can get Congress to act with him, And that has been the dilemma of recent years. But I believe that will change after this election, whoever wins. I honestly believe that. Then I think you can see some real action. And it won't take much. The frustrating thing, and I'm sure Austin feels the same way, having been there recently, our problems are not that difficult. And the solutions to this long-term fiscal problem are not, yes, there will be pain, but they are nowhere near.
We know what the solutions are.
Yeah, it's
right.
fairly simple, and it's fairly painless compared to
Let me ask you this. There have been great books in the last 4 years. Christians is now the newest addition to it, but there have been great books that have explained a bit about why things have happened the way they are. And one of them that removes itself from the economy but focuses very specifically on two instances. One is the Reagan tax cuts and health care reform, was written by Amy Gutmann, the president of the University of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. It's called Compromise. And she argues that two things have happened. One is campaign finance laws and campaign finance have just gotten so out of whack that you're always running for office and you're always raising money and you're always catering to those who have, more so, you're catering to those who are financing your campaigns. And number two, something has happened in the culture and flavor of Washington where bipartisanship that at least used to exist outside of the House of Representatives doesn't exist. You don't have the socialization because of the campaigning. You don't have the same things going on. So we really are growing more and more apart. And ever since you've been in government, we are more apart. We are more partisan than we used to be.
We are more partisan. We're less civil to each other. And we all comment about this politically. What's the matter with these people? Why can't they get along? Why are there why is there so little civility? But maybe they're a little more reflective of society than we want to admit. You know, we are less civil to each other. Any day, pick up a newspaper and see the death rates in America and the murder rates. See how we treat women. That hedge fund guy who talked about domestic abuse and comparing that to the way he's treated. That sums up everything about the problem with some people right now. I mean, to compare how a president speaks of hedge fund people to domestic battery is civil, is sinful in my old Catholic ways. So I think the politicians may be more reflective of society.
So who leads us out of that? I mean, I think I've heard this many times, and I actually, I deal with this on my show a lot, and I get that from a lot of people to say, people are voting for these people who say extreme things, who say we're not going to compromise. So who leads out of it?
Well, I think we have to have more. The political people should be better than the rest of us, in theory. That's why we elect them to be leaders. But they've got to take more risks. I think it has to come from the leaders, but we have to demand more of these people that are there, and not fund the people who do this, and not fund the PACs that go over the edge, not support people who come up with crazy theories of the BLS has totally rigged the numbers because they want to help the president. I mean, that's crazy. Or his birth certificate's phony. But we laugh. But yet, in many ways, we then support those people, or we support those news organizations or whatever that support that, and that's crazy.
Let me ask you this: while we're talking about ideas, when you're in the White House, and you're dealing with the day-to-day grind, the stuff that just pops up, it's like whack-a-mole. You got to deal with it, and you get away from the big think, right? I mean, we all think it looks like the West Wing. You go in there, or like this newsroom that everybody's watching these days. You go in there and you're planning to change the world every single day, but in fact the to-do list is a little too long. Do you sit there and say, boy, why don't we change the system? Why don't we change the Electoral College? Why don't we change the way we do budgeting? Do the big ideas, the things that we're discussing, can they ever happen in that environment?
No.
We're here for honesty.
You come in and try to get through the day and get out. It is very difficult in that setting, in that building, to on a daily basis kind of do the big think, and exactly for the reasons.
Did you watch The West Wing?
I mean, I did watch The West Wing, and there are a lot of similarities to it. At some points we were like,
idealistic
maybe you ought to walk up to the speaker's office and sit outside it, and wait for him to come out and talk to you. But that wasn't a real good idea either. But yeah, no, there's a lot of similarities. The writers of West Wing spent a lot of time in the Clinton years. But the reality is it is a unbelievable place because everything comes through it that we all read about or you hopefully never read about. And so from that perspective, it's a great honor to be in there. I think any chief of staff who's been there, Rahm and anybody else and Bush or anywhere else would say that. But it is if it's a very difficult place to try to get big think and get big things done because of the system we've created and the money, the Congress taking power away. And that's why, in this election, people walking around talking about that we need a CEO. Well, the president is the furthest thing from a CEO than you can have, and so it's a little silly to say.
Tell me about that. Why is that? Because first of all, they're not making executive decisions about everything going on.
Most CEOs, you could take over a company. I don't care how big it is. Jamie Dimon taking over J.P. Morgan or whatever, and if you can have 15, 20, 30 people and put them in the right spots, you can change it. You can't change this thing with 15, 20 people. The president brings in 3,000 people. He probably doesn't get half his people approved. And there's a group that I've been helpful with called No Labels, which is coming up with ideas to try to change the presidency and the Congress with reform ideas that could have an impact. But the president takes over and he puts a budget forward and the Congress just ignores it. Most CEOs, you put a budget through your board, it's already been rigged. The management has already done all the work. The board's approved it even before it's presented, basically. And you can get things done, right or wrong. You may be proven wrong going forward. But this thing is so different. So the mentality of a CEO coming into a job like the presidency, he or she would be a pretty frustrated person.
A president we've got 2 minutes left. Yeah. There will be a president elected on November 6th. On November 7th, whichever man it is who wins has got to do what you did. You went into the White House. You couldn't come in with all the baggage of what had been going on. So a president has to come in on November 7th or in January and say, this is how we are going to get this place back on track. What's the best idea?
Well, the best idea is to honestly speak to the American people on the need for long-term fiscal soundness. And it will be, the one thing the president has been clear about is a balanced approach. We need more revenue. You can't run from it. You can call it whatever you want. You can say we can get it different ways. And that's a big acknowledgement that from people right now that there are ways to get revenue other than just raising rates, and it's not a bad word. And there has to be cuts in our entitlements. So the big idea is not so big. Maybe it is in the sense that honesty may be able to prevail after an election, where right now the system seems to be such that it is very difficult to be frank and honest with the American people the way we've created these campaigns. And
this is the idea of Chicago Ideas Week is that they're good ideas. We don't have a Chicago Bad Ideas Week. But if we did, would you say that all of these members of Congress who signed a pledge, Grover Norquist's pledge to not deal with, as you call them, revenues, as some people call taxes, is that a bad idea because that stops you from being able to compromise?
I think it's a moronic idea. It's not just bad, it's moronic. I mean, how can you make a pledge and no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what the facts are, and stick to it in life? That to me seems to you start with the premise that that's a bad idea. that would not be considered a good one. And there are a lot of bad ideas down there, but that's probably as bad as it comes. And you'll pay politically. George Bush paid for it politically. President Bush 41, and I think 43 made a decision he would never do that. And I think we've paid. That's a partisan comment, but I think we've paid for that idea for a while.
I knew you were a partisan. I called that early on.
Sorry, that's why you're up here.
This is it. Bill, good to see you. Thanks so much for being with us.